What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we got one for all of you sickos out there. We are going to finally talk through the 2025 rookie class. I figured 2023 rookie season's all in the books, right? All of our rookie drafts are done, and we can start looking towards the future. Now, we've already talked about the 2024 rookie class with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., and there's a lot of hype there, which is making these 2025 rookie first-round picks a little bit overlooked and a little bit more acquirable than in years past. So I wanted to sit down, look through the entire class, and kind of give you guys a preview of what to expect, and then talk about if 2025 firsts are worth acquiring right now in Dynasty. We're going to look at the RS grades, all of their production, recruiting profile. We are going knees deep in these recruiting streets. So with all of that being said, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty babe.
Now, I do want to just have a little bit of a disclaimer here. We have 1 year of data to work with, right? The 2025 draft class, all of them just had their freshman seasons. There are plenty of studs in the NFL that did not stand out as freshmen. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, recently Jackson Smith-Njigba. I don't think that Bryce and C.J. Stroud even started that many games as freshmen. So there's still plenty of guys that are going to come along. We're still working with just 1 year of data, so it's pretty fragile. But we're going to look at things today from a macro perspective and just kind of talk about the strength of the class and highlight some players that you should be aware of at each position. Now, when we talk about the strongest position in this 2025 class, my opinion is that the running back class for 2025 is the strongest point here. We have two running backs, Nicholas Singleton, and we have Quinshon Judkins. And this is a Devy draft that I did with a bunch of industry guys. It was me, it was Bush and Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange. We had Dynasty_IM on Twitter. Ian, he works over with the 33rd team with their Dynasty branch of things. He does really great work. So we have analysts in here and then a bunch of guys from our Discord communities as well in this league. So pretty sharp. And I just thought it was a good showcase of kind of what we're working with in terms of 2025, right? Most of these picks in the first round of our Devy draft were 2024 guys, but the two 2025 guys that went first round, Nick Singleton, running back out of Penn State, Quinshon Judkins, running back out of Ole Miss. Now, let's talk first. The guy who went first at the 106, Nick Singleton. Let's sort of talk about him real quick. He is a guy with a lot of pedigree here, 5-star recruit, number one running back in his class, 6 foot, 219 pounds, really good size, just everything you're looking for. Now, he didn't necessarily blow the doors off in year one in terms of production-wise, but he did split the backfield with fellow recruit 4-star Katron Allen. Now, we'll talk about him in a little bit, but he's actually really, really good as well. But Nick Singleton, even sort of splitting the backfield there, put up 1,146 yards from scrimmage and 13 total touchdowns in year one, which will do. That'll play. Now, from an RS grade perspective, this is adjusted yards per team play, which is a really big production input in the RS grades for the running back position. Adjusted yards per team play is rushing yards plus receiving yards times 2. Divided by team play. So just on a per play basis, how much are you contributing? Are you efficient? How much volume are you taking up? And it gives a little bit of a lean towards the receiving game. Now, this is him next to 5 of the most recent-ish elite running back prospects in the RS grades. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Bijan. Then you have Nick Singleton above that dotted line. The dotted line is what we're shooting for, right? That's the average top 12 fantasy running back. And then you have Travis Etienne all the way on the bottom. So not too bad, right? He just looks the part. Now, I do want to zoom out here for a second and talk about what the RS grades are, because we're going to kind of go over this as we go on. And the RS grades are just my prospect model that takes into account a player's production, athleticism, draft capital, and it spits out a grade 1 through 10. You can see 10 plus is legendary, which have a 100% hit rate at top 12 seasons. 7.99 plus is elite, which have an 82% hit rate for top 12 seasons, so on and so forth. I would say Singleton and the guy we'll talk about in a second here, Judkins, are both on pace to be elite prospects in the RS grades. Again, only 1 year of data. We're still kind of projecting things here, but just as of right now, I would call them on track. Now, I do want to say, before we move on here, that if you want the entire RS grade database, I have the 2025 and the 2024 draft classes already on there. The RS Grade database has them. That's available to, I believe, gold or higher members on Patreon. So patreon.com/Ron Stewart. If you want access to that stuff so you can kind of gauge future draft classes, or if you're in Devy leagues, you can find that patreon.com/Ron Stewart. There'll be a link down below the description, and there'll be a link at the top of the comments below for all of you sickos out there that want access to the future classes. I'll probably do an update right before the college season starts to those classes, just to get things a little bit more up to date. Now, the second running back of the top two that I think are worthy of being called elite, Quinshon Judkins. And he's a little bit different from Singleton, where Singleton came in with pedigree and then he looked the part. Quinshon Judkins came in as a 3-star recruit, a little bit undersized at 5'11", 200 pounds, but he absolutely dominated in a backfield next to NFL running back Zach Evans. And we know Zach Evans is really good. He's efficient on a per-touch basis. And even still, he ended up with 1,567 rushing yards in the SEC, which ended up being second all-time among freshman running backs in the SEC behind just Herschel Walker, and he beat out Nick Chubb for that second spot. That's really impressive. He also had 15 catches to go along with it, so the receiving upside is there. The whole thing is super impressive. Again, the only issue, a little bit undersized, not a super crazy recruit, which really just matters because recruit, pedigree, all of that kind of carries through draft capital and your athleticism, but of course, we've seen guys outproduce that all the time. Now, when we throw Quinshon Judkins into that same chart from earlier, adjusted yards per team play, he actually grades out, or he produced more than Nick Singleton last year, behind just Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor, but ahead of studs like Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, all of those guys. So he very, very much looks the part. Really impressive freshman year in the SEC. Did it next to an NFL running back. Again, super, super impressive. Now, those are the two guys I would say are firmly on track to be elite running back prospects. Then we have a tier break to a couple of running backs that are in the mix to probably be gold, maybe have the high end and the upside to be elite. And the first guy I really, really like here is Kaytron Allen out of Penn State. He shared the backfield with Nick Singleton, and Nick Singleton, 5-star recruit, number 1 running back in the nation. He could have just taken a back seat, maybe even redshirted behind Nick Singleton, and Singleton could have just been the bell cow. But Kaytron Allen in this offense earned touches. He had 1,000-plus yards from scrimmage, and he had 20 catches, which was more than Nick Singleton. So this is a guy who's kind of the receiving back to Nick Singleton, despite being 5'11", 220 pounds. So he's a 5'11", 220-pound, 4-star recruit, 1,000-plus yards from scrimmage in his first year, 20 catches, can catch the ball, can be efficient, can produce next to studs. I know that they kind of vulture each other, but it's kind of a similar deal to like kind of what we had with like Javonte and Michael Carter, or I think a better one's probably like Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Josh Jacobs, Damian Harris is another one, Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake. Like we see all the time, like two guys can go like first round and then also day 2. I think that's one of these situations here, and this is Kaytron Allen and the next running back we'll talk about, charted on adjusted receiving yard market share. So receiving yard market share, just your percentage of the receiving yards, just because I think that it's worth noting with these two guys, their receiving profile is what really stands out. You can see Kaytron Allen is above Judkins and Singleton when it comes to receiving, and he's behind just in terms of the other running backs, Gibbs, Bijan, Breece Hall. That's pretty strong. He's above the dotted line. Again, he could have redshirted or whatever, taken a backseat to Nick Singleton, but he comes in there, earned touches, looked really good. Now, in that same graphic, we have Jaden Ott, who is a 6', 200-pound running back, 4-star recruit out of Cal. He had 1,000 yards from scrimmage, or over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. The big thing, though, is he had 46 catches, and he is behind just Jahmyr Gibbs in receiving yard market share. He is somebody that looks like a do-it-all receiving back. 46 catches as a freshman is absolutely insane. Now, when we move on from that, we have Branson Robinson, who I don't even really think is worth putting on that chart, but the Devy community would bunch him in with those two guys. Now, from my point of view, as someone that's not really a Devy guy and is just looking at the numbers, I wouldn't have, I would take Kaytron Allen and Jaden Ott over Branson Robinson, but because I don't look at high school film or really keep up with that circuit, maybe I'm looking like an idiot at the end of the day. But we have Branson Robinson, who kind of looks like the next, Georgia recruit that they just keep churning out. The big thing about them, just look at his picture. That's him as an 18-year-old high schooler. He looks like a grown man, and I think that's kind of the appeal with him. 5'10", 220 pounds. My only concern is he doesn't really catch passes. He just seems more like a big bruiser. And we've seen guys like that at big programs kind of fall flat. Like I think, like I would call like Bo Scarborough that. I would call Master Teague that. If I can get in my like recruit bag here, there's a lot of these guys. I think Samaje Perine I'd kind of put in there as well. Regardless, though, the Georgia pipeline, they keep getting guys drafted highly. Why not bet on another one here? So, again, by the numbers, I wouldn't really have him in that category, but people seem to think that he is a really good recruit. The Georgia team kind of, churns out day 2 running backs, right? We've seen with James Cook, DeAndre Swift, et cetera, et cetera. So, if he's your cup of tea, you can group him in with those guys. And we have one final tier here. No, we actually have 2 more tiers. The next tier these are really more names to watch, okay? And these are 3-star recruits who flashed in year 1. And we'll just kind of go down in order here. Or actually, no, we're not going to go down in order, but we'll just name some of them. Now, I do want to say all of their names, right? So Samuel Brown, Trevor Etienne, Caleb Johnson, Damian Martinez. It looks like Samuel Brown's way on the bottom there, but his dot is just really concentrated in there right by the dotted line. These are all the guys we've talked about so far. Now, you have Trevor Etienne. He goes to Florida Gators, brother of Travis. That's pretty much all there is to him. He produced okay in year 1. And again, this is adjusted yards per team play, so just on a whole, how much did they produce? Then you have Damian Martinez, Oregon State running back. He had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, under 5 catches, so it was looking a little bit more like a grinder than anything, but 5'10", 217 pounds, good size. Then you have Caleb Johnson, running back for Iowa, 6'1", 208 pounds. Again, all these guys are 3-star recruits. And then Samuel Brown, I'm from Jersey. You guys can see behind me, right? Devils, Jets. I really love Samuel Brown. I love Samuel Brown coming out. He was somebody that was kind of on the Devy radar as a freshman. He played in 7 games. He started 1 game. He's 6'1", 220 pounds, and he's going to be the Rutgers starting running back this year. Could be, I think, honestly, anywhere from like Isaiah Pacheco to like an actual day 2 pick. Samuel Brown, somebody to know. Now, after that, our last tier here, which again, we talked about it earlier, and there's kind of be a recurring theme here. Not every player breaks out in year 1. Not every stud in the NFL breaks out in year 1. We have 2 fun recruits who were really highly touted that it seems like there's a lot of buzz this year from the Devy community. The 2 guys that I would keep an eye on that didn't really show much as a freshman. Jamarion Miller, 5'10", 211-pound running back, Alabama 4-star. You'll see as well there's that Emmanuel Henderson kid. He was the 2nd best running back. Seems like he's going to transition to wide receiver, and Jamarion Miller kind of beat him out as an Alabama running back, so that's interesting. Jameer Gibbs also now gone. And then you have Trevante Citizen, 4-star running back for Miami, big boy, 6 foot, 217 pounds. Just 2 guys to keep tabs on. Now, moving on from that, we have the wide receiver position, which isn't bad. It's not a bad, I would call it the 2nd strongest unit, and it's a pretty strong unit. I think I'm kind of underselling it here. When we look at the 2nd round of that Devy draft I mentioned from earlier, we had no wide receivers in the 1st round in 2025, but we did have 3 in the 2nd round, which is still pretty good. Now, I would call these 3 right here the top tier, right? Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M, Luther Burden out of Missouri, and Barryon Brown out of Kentucky. I also want to get out ahead of it. If I pronounce anybody's name wrong, happens to the best of us. Like these are guys, I mean, they're 2 years out from even being in your rookie drafts. I'm not going to get all the pronunciations right. Now, of this top tier, I would have in like the 1A would be Evan Stewart for me. Evan Stewart came in, Texas A&M, number 1 recruit in the nation, 6th best, or number 1 wide receiver recruit in the nation, 6th best overall recruit in the nation, which is also really impressive. And he looked the part. He led the class in receiving yards per team pass attempt here, as you guys can see. He, looks the part next to other elite wide receiver prospects. These are the last 5 elite 1st-round wide receiver prospects: Quentin Johnston, Drake London, Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Jack Smith-Njigba. He comes in 2nd on that list, way above the dotted line. Really good stuff. Now, this is receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is a stat. It's one of the bigger inputs in my wide receiver model, which is just receiving yards divided by team pass attempt. It accounts for efficiency and then also your ability to command volume. He looked like a stud. Also, Dynasty _ I am, the guy I mentioned earlier, Ian. He's in these Devy streets almost much more than I am, I would say. And he has a cool system where he has, like, he ranks recruits, right? So he has, like, promising recruits, and then he has some other kinds of recruits. Promising is just, like, your elite recruits, right? So it's not just, like, 5 stars or whatever. I think he looks at their stats and some other cool stuff. But Evan Stewart came in as a promising recruit. He put up over a 28% receiving yard market share and over 12 points per game as an 18-year-old freshman, and he joins a pretty stacked list of Calvin Johnson, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Deshaun Jackson, Sammy Watkins, Christian Kirk, and Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy is going to be in the 2024 class. He looks pretty solid himself. Evan Stewart, a lot to like here. The only thing that's really a concern with Evan Stewart is he is listed as 5'11", 175 pounds. So, I mean, it depends. I mean, that's not my flavor of wide receiver. You guys know I like the bigger Quentin Johnsons, Drake Londons, Treylon Burks as prospects. But we're in a modern NFL now where Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, or Devonta Smith was like a top 10 draft pick in the NFL. Jordan Addison's still a first-round pick. He'll still get his draft capital, which is fine when we're just talking about the strength of a rookie class. Now, after that, we have Tier 1B, I would call, which would be Barryon Brown and Luther Burden here. We're charting them here. This is just their receiving yard market share, just so their percent of receiving yards in their offense. And the guy who stands out ahead of Luther Burden, but behind Evan Stewart, is Barryon Brown here. He clears a dotted line. He's not too far behind Evan Stewart. He was a 4-star wide receiver recruit, top 10 wide receiver recruit overall in his class. Plays for Kentucky. He's a little skinny at like 6'1", 173, but you never really know how much weight these guys can put on. But he's really exciting as a 6'1", 173-pound guy because he's super dynamic. He's really fast. He's dynamic. He takes kick returns. He takes punt returns. He had a touchdown on kick return this year as a freshman. He took rush attempts. He was third in the SEC in yak per reception among all wide receivers. So a really exciting profile there where he can kind of do it all. And then you also have Luther Burden, who, as you guys can see, had the worst production of the bunch, but he has the most pedigree. He is the next 5-star recruit after Evan Stewart. He's been getting Deebo Samuel comps where he's 5'11", 208 pounds, so, much bigger than these other two guys. And he had 18 rush attempts as a freshman for 88 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 12 punt returns, 1 punt return touchdown. You guys know I'm a sucker for wide receivers who are dynamic. I want guys who, make things happen with the ball in their hands. The possession guys are cool, but the guys who can, give you those monster efficiency, yak per reception type seasons are monsters, and they can just get included in the run game. They can just get the ball more times. Now, the biggest issue with him is lack of production, and he also had a really low ADOT. So he also has the concerns of a Deebo, where Deebo had a really low ADOT. He had just 8.7 yards per reception, which is really bad. It's tough to be efficient when your ADOT's so low and yards per reception so low. I will say the Missouri passing offense wasn't efficient or good, but you got to expect more than the 375th yards per out run out of 445 qualifying Power 5 wide receivers. So it really just comes down to pedigree with Luther Burden versus Barryon Brown actually producing. I think as of right now, gun to my head, I would probably say Barryon Brown wide receiver 2, Luther Burden wide receiver 3 for me, but you can have those guys interchanged as much as you'd like. Now, we take a tier break to guys that I would say. Now, I'll say that the previous 3 guys we talked about, Evan Stewart for me, locked and loaded elite wide receiver prospect. I would say Barryon Brown and Luther Burden are kind of on track to be like low-end elites, high-end golds. And then we have a tier break to guys, for me, who flashed enough to be on track to be golds, low-end golds, maybe fall out and become silver, but still really strong wide receiver prospect. Maybe one guy of this bunch will be elite. Who knows? Now, first up, we have Antonio Williams here. And he comes in right after Barryon Brown in terms of receiving yard market share. And he put up strong numbers. He played at Clemson, 4-star wide receiver, also top 10 in his class in terms of wide receivers. He's more of a slot guy, though. One of his comps that I saw somebody throw out there was Randall Cobb, which is interesting. He took rush attempts, kick return, punt return, 5'11", 190-pound slot wide receiver, a little bit more compact. He had over 90% of his routes out of the slot. So not super high upside with Antonio Williams, but the production's there. He looks, probably kind of like one of these Josh Downs, Marvin Mims types in Antonio Williams. And then you have, this is a name that's going to trick me up, but we have Teteroa McMillan. I think that's how you say it. But he produced in a stacked Arizona wide receiver room, which is Ron, why Arizona? What are we talking about here? But they had 2 potential NFLers last year. They had 4-star wide receiver recruit Dorian Singer, who is transferring to USC. And then Jacob Cowing, who transferred from UTEP and is just an absolute stud. He had 85-plus catches last year. He's really, really good. I wanted him to declare this year, but it seems like he's going to declare after year 5 now. Probably ends up being a day 3 guy, but a mega producer in school. But we have Teteroa McMillan. He was the 4th-ranked wide receiver in this class, 4-star, 6'4", 185 pounds. So really thin, but maybe you can add weight to that frame. Being that tall in an era where wide receivers are super small right now is interesting. And he's also a downfield guy. 16.2 yard ADOT, catching bombs all the way downfield. Hopefully, I mean, the hope is here that he can kind of grow into this frame a little bit more, expand on his game, but interesting profile here. Then we have a mini tier break where I would still include all these guys like on track to be, in the conversation as gold wide receiver prospects. These are guys that the Devy community doesn't like, but popped in the RS grades. So first we have Jordan Tyson here. Now this is receiving yard market share, and it's just all of the 2025 guys we're going to talk about here. And Jordan Tyson actually beat out Evan Stewart for the most receiving yard market share in this class. Now I will say, disclaimer, he played on Colorado last year, and Colorado had a really low volume passing offense. He led that passing offense, or that receiving game, with just 470 receiving yards. So really low volume. Kind of reminds me of like a Stephen Hill, at Georgia Tech when they wouldn't pass the ball a ton, but still worth noting. 4-star recruit, 6'2", 180 pounds, which is an interesting build. And he joins Evan Stewart in this little list here of Power 5 wide receivers with over a 28% receiving yard market share in year one. Now, it's not a bulletproof list by any means. Now, I will say, you see anybody that's 2024, 2025, their draft capital, purely a projection. All that matters is that year one receiving yard market share and their conference. I believe I sorted everything out for Power 5, but we have Stephon Diggs, Tyler Boyd, Calvin Johnson, Julio, Amari Cooper, Marquise Lee, Sammy Watkins, Rondell Moore, Calvin Ridley. It's a good list. Akeem Nicks, Christian Kirk, Jordy Nelson, Alshon Jeffrey, Quentin Johnston this year. A lot of first round and second round picks in there, which is kind of what we're looking for. He also had 20.3 yards per reception, which is how you get such a crazy, receiving yard market share number on such a low volume offense. But that was one of 5 wide receivers in the Power 5 to have over 20 yards per catch, joining Marvin Mims in there. He's a big play wide receiver. He's dynamic. 4 punt returns, 2 kick returns, and had 1 punt return touchdown. A touchdown on just 6 returns is pretty damn crazy. 3 rush attempts as well. That's really fun. The only thing to be skeptical of, again, low volume pass offense, but he is transferring to Arizona State anyways, which I don't know college ball enough to tell you how that offense is going to look, but it's a change of scenery. He gets out of the Deion Sanders, program, whatever you want to call it. Now, after that, we have Jordan Tyson, we have Evan Stewart, Barryon Brown, who we've talked about. Then we have Dane Key, 6'2", 195-pound, 4-star athlete. He produced actually next to Barryon Brown at Kentucky last year. He's more of a downfield wide receiver, where he was the only Kentucky wide receiver with over a 10-yard ADOT with a 14.2-yard ADOT, and he led the SEC with 14 contested catches. So really interesting profile there. A little bit overshadowed by Barryon Brown right now, but Dane Key also looks really good. 6'2", 195 pounds is really, really nice size in an era where all of these college guys are super small, like our boy Squirrel White. Now, again, I do want to make sure that we're understanding that, from Dane Key through Matthew Golden, their dots are literally right next to each other, just below the dotted line. Still pretty strong freshman seasons. And Squirrel White, crazy name, 3-star recruit, tiny guy, 5'10", 165 pounds. He goes to Tennessee, and he led the entire country in yards per out run, which is absolutely nutty here. 4.03 yards per out run, led the entire country, ahead of guys like Puka Nacua, who got drafted, Jalen Hyatt, Trey Palmer, Marvin Harrison Jr., Quentin Johnston, Rashee Rice. Now, of course, he didn't run a load of routes, but he ran a good amount of routes. He produced all right. You can say that Tennessee offense kind of sets up their wide receivers to just blow up yards per out run and everything. Completely fine. But still, this kind of production next to NFL wide receivers and Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, it's worth noting. The upside isn't crazy at 5'10", 165 pounds, but he is somebody that's so efficient and put up enough numbers with receiving yard market share that you kind of just have to listen. Now, this is somebody that the Devy community doesn't like. He's probably a guy that maybe can sneak into the second round, but probably more of a 3rd, 4th, 5th round type guy. But he's somebody worth noting, Squirrel White. And then our last guy here, a little bit more prototypical, probably gets drafted higher than Squirrel White, is Matthew Golden. 4-star wide receiver, 6 foot, 190 pounds, plays at Houston, was a monster in high school. Looking at his numbers, he had he averaged over 100 receiving yards, over 1 receiving touchdown per game. in like a really high level Texas conference, literally right outside Houston. So it's cool that he's playing at Houston or whatever. But putting up those kinds of numbers in like a Texas division high school, really impressive. He produced next to Tank Dell, who just got drafted, NFL wide receiver, 3rd round as well. So that's, pretty impressive to still put up, a fine receiving yard market share number. And he's kind of a prototypical X-type wide receiver, Matthew Golden. Now, this last tier is just going to be some other names. These are guys where if you're watching college football on a Saturday, maybe you should, keep an eye out for them. These are highly touted recruits or guys in big programs who had quiet year ones. And let's just take a look at this list here. I have the entire recruiting list here. Yeah, so 2022 top wide receiver recruits. You have a couple guys. You have Adam Randall, who's all the way there at the bottom, 4-star wide receiver for Clemson, 6'3", 215 pounds. Kind of a sad story. He tore his ACL in the offseason last year, so he didn't get to have a year one. So I'm willing to, kind of give him a mulligan there, but you hope that he recovers well and is still himself, right? After that, you have Chris Marshall. I believe that's the last 5-star wide receiver here. I hate to say that I was actually looking into some of the background. Chris Marshall, crazy story. He was a basketball stud and didn't pick up football until his junior year in high school. So that could either mean that he has room to grow and he can become better after kind of being a zero in his first year. He transferred from Texas A&M, where he was next to Evan Stewart, and now goes to Ole Miss. Or you can see it as he's a pretty raw guy. Maybe his athleticism just kind of carried him in high school. I don't know. You can look at it however you want. There's some Chris Marshall fans out there. He gets a new change of scenery. Maybe he balls out. Then you have a guy who's on here at the bottom, Kobe Prentice, 4-star Alabama wide receiver, 5'10", 182 pounds. Didn't really produce, but Alabama wide receivers, they get drafted. Then you have Isaiah Bond, who's not on this list because he was a athlete, is what he was listed as a recruit. 4-star Alabama athlete, 5'11", 182 pounds, also a tinier guy. Then the last guy I think is worth mentioning. He's not on this list because he was a cornerback recruit. Travis Hunter, he is the number 1 overall recruit in this 2022 class, 2025 rookie class, 2022 high school class. But he plays both ways, kind of like Deion Sanders, which is his coach or whatever. He plays wide receiver and cornerback. Last year at Jackson State, he had 17 catches, 187 yards, and 4 touchdowns, just as a part-time wide receiver, over 3 yards per out run. Not a great level of competition, but still pretty wild. He probably ends up playing corner, but if he does end up ever making the switch to wide receiver, he could be a stud. He could be, one of the best wide receivers in this class if he truly wanted to. It's kind of what it seems like from what I hear about him. Now, after that, we have quarterback and tight end, and I'll be honest with you guys. This is kind of where the class falls off. Quarterback and tight end, not super strong in this class. Kind of a crapshoot. When we talk about quarterback, at least, not a lot of them got to start games. And again, we talked about it earlier. Bryce Young didn't play as a freshman. C.J. Stroud didn't play as a freshman. Anthony Richardson didn't play as a freshman. I'm trying to think back here. I mean, Burrow didn't play as a freshman. There's been a lot of guys recently who have been, big dynasty assets that didn't produce in year one. So it's not the end of the world. It's really not the end of the world. But when we look here, I have about 5 quarterbacks that I think are worth mentioning here. And I just have them ordered by their passing yards last year. None of them even hit 1,000 passing yards, but you have 5 here. Connor Weigman, Cade Klubnik, Drew Allar, Ty Simpson, Devin Brown. Those are the 5 names that I think are worth mentioning here. Now, I have, and I think most people do, have Connor Weigman, Cade Klubnik, Drew Allar in a tier above Ty Simpson and Devin Brown, because Ty Simpson and Devin Brown had 0 passing yards last year. They didn't get on the field. They have a little bit of a tougher pathway to get in, but they are highly touted recruits. But the 3 guys to really know their names is Drew Allar, Cade Klubnik, and Connor Weigman. These are the 2nd and 3rd rounds of that Devy draft. You can see I actually took Drew Allar at the 201. You had Cade Klubnik go at the 206, and you had Connor Weigman go at the 311. So all guys that are still, not first-round picks in Devy, but are still guys that are, in the mix. Now, when we talk about my QB1 in this class, and a guy that I would have in a slight tier, like a tier of his own, would be Drew Allar. Now, Drew Allar is really, really interesting to me. I will say there's a lot of downside here. We've seen a bunch of, high-end quarterback prospects not work out. DJ Uiagalelei as one of them. But Drew Allar is really exciting. He's listed as 6'5", 240 pounds, was the number 1 QB recruit in this class, 3rd in the entire class. You can see 3rd in the entire nation, 100 recruiting ranking or rating on 247. And his comparison from this guy who like watched some high school tape has him as Josh Allen. He's exciting. He's probably the most like toolsy quarterback of this bunch, where he's just like, again, 6'5", 240, massive arm, can scramble. I think in the spring game they were having him do some read option and zone read type stuff. So that's really exciting, right? He has monster amounts of upside. He gets to be the starting quarterback at Penn State, which is enough pedigree to get drafted highly. You'll have Katron Allen Singleton, the guys we talked about earlier. They always turn out tight ends and wide receivers. So really interesting. Cannon arm, big kid that can scramble. I would have him at the top. And then really not too far behind would be my tier 1B of Cade Klubnik and Connor Wegman. Now this is just their just the top 5 quarterbacks per 247, which just end up being the top 5 quarterbacks in this class for right now, because no freshman quarterback really stood out in year one. But Cade Klubnik and Connor Wegman are both interesting. They're both, as of right now, penciled in as the week 1 starter at Clemson and Texas A&M, 2 big programs. They both have weapons, where A&M has Evan Stewart, the guy we talked about, the number 1 wide receiver in this class. Cade Klubnik has Adam Randall and Antonio Williams, 2 wide receivers we also talked about in this class. Good weapons. They're both penciled in for week 1. They're also both not like Konami code guys, but they're both at least mobile, right? Cade Klubnik had 1 start this year. He had 10 rushes for 75 rushing yards and a touchdown. That's exciting. And then Connor Wegman had 36 rushing yards per game in his 4 starts. Also exciting. It seems like Connor Wegman's a little bit bigger and a little bit more of an athlete than Cade Klubnik, but Cade Klubnik, he played in like he actually beat Quinn Ewers in Quinn Ewers' high school national championship, or high school state championship in like Texas, which is like the mecca of college football or whatever. It was probably played at Jerry World, or not, the mecca of high school football, played at Jerry World. And I believe Cade Klubnik actually won that game. So he was a stud in high school. Apparently his arm is crazy. Everybody loves Cade Klubnik in terms of what he did in high school. Wasn't that crazy last year for Clemson, but we'll see what he can kind of do in year 2. Then we have a tier breakdown to Ty Simpson, Devin Brown, both listed on the bottom here. You know, Ty Simpson, 5-star, Devin Brown just behind them. Alabama, Ohio State, quarterback factories. You have Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. They just left. Really the reason why they're behind is they didn't do anything this year, and they're both penciled in as QB2 on their depth charts. Jalen Milroe at Alabama. Then you have Kyle McCord at Ohio State. But both of those guys, you know, could be benched pretty easily. So both of these guys could easily find their way onto the field. They're both interesting. They're both at really high-level schools. I wouldn't completely write off this quarterback class. We just don't have enough info or, you know, a big enough sample to go off just yet. Now, our last position group we'll talk about is tight end. And we have like 3 that I like here, but I mean, there's going to be guys who emerge or whatever, but the 3 guys that I like that stick out to me are Oscar Delp, Jaleel Skinner, Donovan Green. Now, the issue is like none of them really had a lot of production. I mean, Donovan Green had about 250 receiving yards, and you have Jaleel Skinner, Oscar Delp, like sub 150-ish range, right? This is just raw receiving yards, what they're ordered like. But, you know, you have some things to like here where Oscar Delp, next Georgia guy, number 1 recruit in the class in terms of tight ends. You know, maybe he's next in that pipeline of Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, and it's not really, you can't really expect him to produce in a room with Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers. Maybe he could be the next in line of this like tight end factory. He is 6'5", 225 pounds, so he's more of your like wide receiver tight end hybrid, move tight end. He probably puts on a little bit more weight, and he had a 12.2 yards per reception this year, which isn't terrible. 12.2 is okay. I would say like 10 yards per reception is bad. Somewhere in like that 12 area is fine. And then like 14 plus is really good. Which brings us to Donovan Green, Texas A&M guy. He led this class in receiving yards. The issue is that I read through his 247 stuff. Like coming out of high school, he doesn't really seem like a crazy athlete or anything. He had just a 10.6 yards per reception, which kind of confirms that. But you never know. You know, maybe these guys kind of, I don't know, get better, become more athletic just from school or whatever, but Donovan Green could also be well on his way to being like Jalen Weidermeyer, you know, a guy who produced at Texas A&M and then he tests and it doesn't look good. Tight end's a crapshoot anyways. There's going to be guys who emerge. I will say my favorite of the bunch, the guy who I think has the most upside here, is Jaleel Skinner, Miami boy. Now, this is a guy who had a 14.3 yards per reception, really explosive. It was a low sample, but really explosive, really athletic. And if you read or skim through this like 247 kind of like evaluation of him in high school, he ran track, he played basketball, he transfers to IMG Academy in Florida, which is a big boy school, at the end of it. He played more like wide receiver, slot wide receiver, inline stuff. Like he almost reminds me of like a David Njoku type where he's just really athletic, playing more wide receiver. His comparison here is Jared Cook. That's an exciting profile. We'll kind of see if the production comes with it. But that's going to do it for tight ends. Now, when we talk about this class and we come down to a verdict, right? When we look at this entire class, should we be wanting to acquire 2025 rookie picks in Dynasty? That is the whole point of this video today. And my answer would be yes and no. This class is not the 2023 rookie class or the 2024 rookie class where even 2 years out, people were kind of, I guess 2024 rookie class I wouldn't really put in that category, but 2023 rookie class I would. People are like dropping everything to try and acquire and scoop up those rookie picks. But I think this class is fine through 1 year. So I wouldn't drop everything and go acquire them in every single one of my leagues, but I think that it's fine through 1 year, right? You have two really strong running back prospects in Quinshawn Judkins and Nick Singleton. You have a bunch of guys in the mix to be like day 2 running backs like Katron Allen, Branson Robinson, Jaden Ott. You have a bunch of other guys that are also kind of in the mix. You have Evan Stewart, who I would have as a pretty locked and loaded first-round elite wide receiver prospect. You have a couple of other wide receivers to look at like Luther Burden, Barryon Brown. There's guys in the mix, right? So you have like 3 really strong elite level prospects here after just 1 year. You're going to have like 3, 4 other guys kind of in the mix to be in that next tier. The weak part of this class is quarterback, which is bad because the most valuable position in Dynasty is quarterback, right? The entire startup first round ADP is dominated by quarterback. But we have just 1 year of a sample. None of these guys really got to start for prolonged periods of time, and I kind of would blame like almost like the transfer portal where you can just kind of get, your veterans in there to play early. You don't really have to start these freshmen right away. But it would be really easy for someone to emerge, right? We've seen guys emerge late. Again, Burrow, we've seen Kyler Murray. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks where in year 1, they're not amazing. They don't get drafted highly. I don't think Trey Lance played in year 1. Mac Jones, of course, didn't play in year 1. So Justin Fields didn't play in year 1. So there's a lot, there's a lot of upside with this quarterback class is what I'm trying to say. Where I wouldn't say it's bad. I would just say it's unknown at this point. You also have a lot of the 2025 guys kind of trickle down to the 2020 or the 2024 guys trickle down to 2025 where, of course it's very unlikely, but Caleb Williams, Drake May, one of them could stay another year. You have other guys in that quarterback class that could maybe stay another year. So something else to look out for. And then again, not every good prospect, not every highly rated prospect was a stud in year 1, right? We saw Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Garrett Wilson, Zeke Elliott, Travis Etienne, a bunch of guys who didn't really come onto the scene and go crazy in year 1. So there's going to be more names that get added to the mix. There's going to be a bunch of other guys who kind of are late bloomers, all of that. So while I wouldn't make it my like life's mission to go in every league and go, scour teams to go get 2025 rookie picks, I think on rebuilding teams where you're just trying to push value out into your contending window, I like the idea of acquiring 2025 first. And on rebuilding teams, I am acquiring 2025 first for cheap. They're really easy to get right now. And it's just a good way of pushing out value because almost surely your 2025 rookie picks will be worth more in a year than right now, even though this class isn't absolutely amazing. Now, it's a little bit of a gamble. I would say, most rookie picks gain value regardless. But you're also taking the gamble where there's a bunch of upside. If Drew Allar really comes along and is like a nasty quarterback prospect or somebody comes out of nowhere, there's a lot of upside for that. Of course, there is downside, but rookie picks are the safest asset in Dynasty. I don't think that this class is so bad to the point where you can't acquire them on teams where it makes sense. Now, on like contenders and stuff, I'm not really dying to get 2025 first, but these are kind of the moves that I've made for 2025 first. You have here, I was a rebuilder on this team. I was trading away the 101 or Bijan, and I got the 106, a 2024 first, and then also a 2025 first. I like the idea of like in blockbuster deals where you're trying to like move off, like let's say like a Christian McCaffrey or a Stephon Diggs, a Tyreek Hill, where you're trying to move off of a guy who's going to score points on a rebuilding team. And I cannot stress this enough. If you're a contending team trying to make the playoffs, 2025 first, you don't have to think about. But if you're a rebuilding team, offloading your big name veterans and just sneaking a 2025 first on the end, I think is a really, really nice way to acquire 2025 firsts. And then also when we're stripping down these rebuilding teams, here's a bunch of trades I looked at on Fantasy Calc, and I blacked out the ones I wouldn't have done. But these are a bunch of deals that I would make if I was a rebuilding team. Like if I had a Miles Sanders on a rebuilding team, I would literally hit up not even hit up. Just go to every single team in your league. If you have like a Miles Sanders on a rebuilding team where you don't want to score, you don't want to compete, offer him for a 2025 first on every single team. See what happens. You can say that for pretty much every player that's on this list. I like doing that with Darren Waller, Aaron Jones, and I'm not even necessarily low on Darren Waller or low on Keenan Allen, but on a rebuilding team, if you can offload any of these guys for a 2025 first, I would. DeAndre Swift, Aaron Rodgers, Alvin Kamara at this point. John Mingo is kind of seen as like a rebuilding asset, but I'm not a big fan of John Mingo. If I could get a 25 first for him, I would. Dalvin Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, any of these running backs that you don't want on a rebuilding team, see if you can sneak a 2025 first out of any of them. I think it's early on enough where people haven't really caught up to this 2025 class. Not that it's like an amazing class by any means, but I think that it's getting slept on a little bit here with kind of 2024 being at the forefront. Now, with all of that being said, that is going to do it for us today. As always, again, if you are a Devi sicko, if you are acquiring 2025 firsts, if you are a pervert that is just obsessed with looking at 19-year-old recruits, check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have everything you could possibly want there, from Dynasty rankings, redraft rankings, trade recommendations, the entire RS grade database. And if you get the gold or better tier, right, we have silver, gold, elite, legendary tiers on Patreon. If you get gold or better, you get access to all of my Devi RS grades. So I have already put them through the RS grading system, the 2024 and the 2025 draft classes. So if you want to see in their entirety, I even have guys I didn't mention on this list that I ran through just to ran through. So if that interests you at all, check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be in the description down below and the comments pinned at the top. As always, I appreciate you guys sticking around for me to the end. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoenaed for misdemeanors. Dreamer, held back asses, Loki still a zen. And I still shake a bull squat.